Welcome to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Join us on a journey where we unravel the intricacies of workplace dynamics. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns, and another beautiful day here in Portland. It's gray skies from one end to the other end. It's got that beautiful chill, kind of that beautiful wet chill to it. Akeem Shannon and my next guest and I were just chatting about the different kinds of weather that we love. And boy, Portland brings it. If you're an outdoors person, if you are that a Columbia wearer, if you're a what is my other one I've got on now? Patagonia. Yeah, this is we're in Patagonia territory. We are in Subaru territory up here in the Pacific Northwest. I hope everybody's having a great day going on. Akeem, thanks for being a guest. Thanks for taking some time out.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Akeem, I love this show because it does allow me to kind of get into a little bit of a different side of humans. And we talk about, mostly I talk a lot about work and, whether that's work or whether it's outside in real life. I think the reality is that the whole human is showing up now. The days of us leaving, our troubles and our personalities at home, or in the car are kind of over. I think, COVID really brought that out where everywhere we go, the whole human is showing up. And this is really what it is about, trying to be, a good, well put together whole person that shows up, is trying to kind of that part of flourishing and getting to a place where we've got all the components of being a good human together, and we're able to display those to other people as we go around through life. And I think you got a great story. Well, I'll tease you a little bit on that one because you were in the least humanist environment possibly on the planet, where we watch people's dreams come crashing down, but also a place where dreams do come true. You were a veteran, an alumni on the Shark Tank, amongst other things. So welcome to the show. Thanks for being on this journey of pursuit of flourishing. And how's everything going? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, listen, Ken, thanks for having me on. I am a survivor of the tank, happy to say, made it out alive. But yeah, I mean, look, I love what you're doing because the truth is that you can't show up to work, right, and leave everything at home. It was never true. We may have told ourselves we could do it, but it never was the case. And I'm truly a product of that. Honestly, I wouldn't even have a business. I would have never made it into the tank if I hadn't have shown up as myself, number one, and then ultimately left places because it just I couldn't leave me at home.
Oh yeah. This is really, it's tough. People sometimes, I look at so many times when that was me, having to bite down on the bit and to suck it up and to show up, for whatever reason. And I really feel for people, where their job sometimes is, we need a job. And there are times when,
got bills to pay.
you got bills to pay and you've got to do it despite. Before we go too far down the rabbit hole on you, because I have a couple of questions. I always, I'll be the first victim of the jar. So as we talked a little bit earlier, I've got some questions for you to answer. And, this part of the humanist part is also inclusive of the jar, which is part of my original, which actually was my original podcast, 444 questions crammed into these beautiful jars, and traveled around the country, interviewed 330 people in their homes for an hour and a half going through these questions. And it was an amazing journey. And so we're now taking this kind of virtual and using it to get to know people and kind of find out what it is to be a human. So one for me is a tough one. Oh, holy cow. That's a wake up call. Have you ever lost hope?
Ooh.
This is, I always, yeah. And this is, this question, when it used to get pulled by people sitting in their kitchen table, there were just two ways this thing went, right? Sometimes it was a very positive person, and there were and it would initiate some other stories that were pretty tough, and hearing people who had been to a place where they had lost hope. And it's a real thing. And I think
Mm-hmm.
those are the same people we're standing next to in the grocery store. You're
Mm.
sitting behind in a traffic light. They're the people checking you out. There's somebody that calls you on the phone, and they're at a job and they're grinding, and there are people out there that are really on the edge of hope. And so I think it's a great card. Not me. That's not, that hasn't been me yet. I don't think that'll be me. But there are people out there. So I think it's a great reminder that not everybody is hopeful all the time. And that's certainly also a difficult level to sustain. But you were probably
Mm-hmm.
hopeful when you were standing out. Did you have hope when you were outside the Shark Tank, waiting behind the curtain? What happened?
Well, at that point, yes, I had lots of hope. I mean, I had lots of nerves too. I thought I was having a heart attack. My heart was pumping, so
God,
vigorously. But when you talk about moments that are hopeless, I think there's a lot of hopeless moments, and I think it really just comes down to what people do in those moments
mm,
determines whether they become hopeless for you or not. And I think for
yeah,
me, I've been very fortunate that in those times where hope could be lost, and a lot of
yes,
people would have lost hope altogether. For me, I just said, no, I refuse, and just kept powering through, even in the darkest of times. And, it led me to that door, that infamous Shark Tank door opening in front of me. And I'm just grateful that I didn't give up too soon, man.
where do you get it? You have is it a mom dad thing? Is it inside you?
I don't know for sure, but I'll tell you the first time, the biggest moment that really kind of set this up for me, and it was I had gotten a full ride scholarship to college. I was in
Okay,
Washington D.C. at Howard University,
man.
and I lose my scholarship. Okay, I lose the scholarship.
Oh,
I'm on academic probation. I go back up
oh,
to school anyway, even though I knew I wasn't supposed to be there. And I'm essentially squatting in the dorm, okay, for a full semester. And no one knew. My parents didn't know. My friends didn't know. My classmates, nobody
and
knew.
you're carrying
And
that
people
weight.
would
You're
see,
carrying that around.
woo, it was a heavy weight. It was so heavy. And I
Jeez.
remember being in my dorm room, and like I would sleep all day, stay up all night, and like I didn't even realize how depressed I was at the time. I was
Yeah,
eating
yeah.
cheese and crackers, Ken. Like I was like, because I was like, oh, I gotta save money, in case I need it, and so I'm just gonna have this cheese, crackers, and pepperoni. Like it was really, really low, and I didn't even realize how low I was at the time.
Yes.
And I had just convinced myself that there was no recovery, right? I was hiding from my future because I was certain that, when I leave this dorm room, my life is over,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I've flunked out of school, and nothing will ever become of me. I'm a failure. And I have to, eventually, I'll have to let everyone else in on the fact that I'm a failure.
Oh,
And, calling my parents at the end of that semester, it was around Christmas. It was one of the hardest phone calls I ever made because it felt like an insurmountable failure to overcome from. And I finally made the phone call, and they were nice on the phone, but I gotta be honest, Ken, when I got home, they was not happy. They were pissed. They were pissed, and I was pissed because it was like, man, I screwed. I couldn't believe that I had wasted in my mind this opportunity of a lifetime.
yes. Yeah.
And my parents were even further upset because they were like, you didn't even ask for help. When you needed help, you could have called us, we could have made phone calls, we could have tried to do something, and you
Yeah.
didn't even ask for help. Instead, you hid it from us so that no one could help you. And now it's too late for us to do anything about it. And that was one of those times where I had two options, right? It was either give up, lose all hope, or overcome. And I just made the choice. I was like, look, I have to overcome. I have to figure it out. So when I got back home, I made myself a promise that I said, okay, well, if I can't graduate from college, and I got lots of friends in 3 years are going to graduate from college, I was like, at least I can be making as much money as the average college graduate makes. And so
Like it.
that
Good
was my
shift.
goal.
Good
I just said,
shift.
look, that'll make me feel better about myself
Yeah.
because my self esteem was in the dirt. Okay, it was low, and so I got to work. I started working in a retail store selling cell phones. It was a Sprint store. Started off making $10 an
Oh,
hour plus
oh
commission.
man.
And I was grinding. I didn't have a car at the time. I was taking a bus to work. It was horrible. I'd never taken a public bus in my life. It was just the
Oh,
worst. It was the worst. And it took me an hour to get to work. And but I was so determined. I owed the school like a few $1,000s, maybe like $4,000 for the dormitory that I hadn't paid for.
for your
And
squatting.
yeah, for my squatting. And I got to work, and I ended up working at Square, excuse me, at Sprint, and got a few promotions. Was very good at sales. Ended up working at Verizon in a call center where I was also very good. Got invited there by another a manager of mine who I previously worked with. And by the time my friends were graduating, I was making close to $100,000 a year, and I had saved up nearly $100,000 in cash. And I remember
Whoa.
as my friends were sending like, "Hey, we're graduating. Akeem, like, where are you? Why haven't you answered our text messages for the past 3 years?" I finally came out to like, look,
Yeah.
yeah, I screwed up.
I
I'm not in school. I failed, but I'm doing all right. And it really took me recovering from that absolute failure to plant that seed within me that, hey, no matter what, when all hope seems lost,
yeah.
it's not. It really isn't. And I was able to look back on that time in my life again and again when I would face other
Yes.
moments that felt hopeless and be like, well,
Uh,
look, if I can make it through that, I can make it through this. And so, yeah, I mean, that was the one I think that really like instilled those values within me. I don't think I knew I had it within me until it happened.
it's interesting how you kind of go within yourself in those moments, those times,
Mm,
right? Like your mom and dad said, why didn't you reach out? And
mhm. Yeah,
your story would be different
totally.
had you
It would be
picked
totally different.
up the phone.
Totally
Yeah.
different. And it's like I think back on it sometimes. I'm like, they knew the director of the music program, and I was good. I would spend Thanksgiving with them, and there was all these things that like if I had have reached out, I
Yeah.
probably could have got some support and help. But
Yeah.
I didn't want to tell anyone that I even needed the help because then it was like, well, I failed, and it was a mistake.
It's interesting. Just how you look back on life and you realize, that was a lesson you had to learn
Hmm.
about who you really were inside. And it was no longer about mom and dad helping you, pulling your own booty out of your own
Yep.
poopy pile.
Yeah. And it's like people often ask me like, on this journey, do you have any regrets? And I really don't have any
Uh,
regrets because I'm like,
yeah.
man, I was studying chemical engineering and I hated chemistry, so that was a red flag. But I just think I'm like, man, if I was a chemical engineer, I could be designing Cheez-Its into 100-calorie packs, something that I would not enjoy doing, and it's like,
Oh,
I do believe for me, it was meant for this to happen, but it was
yeah.
also meant for me to learn the resiliency that I had within
I,
because without knowing that, I never would have taken the chances and done the things that I would later go on to do because I would have been too afraid. And so because I had really just had to face
yes.
the fear of immense failure head on, now failure wasn't so scary anymore because it's like, well, I know what happens when I fail. I just figure it out.
I eat cheese and pepperoni sticks. Yeah, that's no, it's not
Yeah,
that bad.
cheese and pepperoni steaks. I love that.
I mean, what is failure? Define failure. That's when you're down. It's when you're down to crackers, cheese, and
Man,
pepperoni
I'm
stuff that
telling you.
doesn't need refrigeration.
None. Oh man.
Yeah, that's
Listen,
a
I was
bad
talking to
moment.
someone the other day, and I had made this charcuterie board and had all this fancy stuff on it. And they're like, they're like, wow, this is so good. Did you buy this? I said, no, I made this myself. I was like, probably because I used to eat cheese and crackers. That's why I love charcuterie.
You didn't call it. I mean, you didn't call it a charcuterie board when you were in the dorm. I'm
Oh
sure.
yeah, no, these were saltines and Ritz.
I, I
This
was gonna
was.
say. Oh, I think it's illegal in most countries to call it a charcuterie board if it has a saltine on it.
Yeah, I
Take
don't think it's the same.
Yeah, take us to. I was, you're describing that one thing. sitting on the bus, I mean, you're
Mhm.
really alone, right?
Mm,
Give us one of those, take us to one of those bus moments, 7 a.m. or whatever
s-
time, and what are you
man,
thinking when you're sitting on the bus going to Verizon, and you're not a chemical engineering student? That's
you
gotta.
know, it was painful because I remember I would ride my bike. Well, one is winter time, right? So it's cold. So I would ride my bike to the bus station,
Oh
and
God.
yeah,
Oh
and so
man.
I had to ride my bike to the bus. And then once I rode my bike to the bus, put it on, and I'm on here, and when you get on the bus, like if you get like I was recently in London on the bus. The bus in London is nice, okay? It's a whole bunch of millionaires on the bus. It's fantastic, okay? The
Absolutely.
bus in St. Louis, Missouri is just filled with depression, okay? It's a horrible. And it was just one of those things where I'm looking around at the people I'm around, never been around these
Yes.
types of
Yes.
people
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
life. And it was just like, whoa, like I felt very low. I felt
Yes.
very, very low. And I remember like I used to have to catch the bus to go to our morning meetings because we'd have a morning meeting once a week. And
Oh
sometimes I
yeah.
wouldn't have to work the day of the morning meeting. So I would literally take the bus an hour to
Oh.
be in a meeting for an hour and then go back home for an hour. And then sometimes I would go for the meeting, but I wouldn't work until the evening. So I would just have to sit there in the back,
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
my phone for 4 hours while I wait for my shift to start. It was terrible. And like, but here's the thing: when you're in that space, like,
Yes.
there was nothing I wanted more than to buy a car because I hated it. I hated catching that bus. And so when I tell you I
Mm.
didn't spend a dime, Ken, I remember people were like, "Hey, do you want something from the dollar menu at McDonald's?" Nope, I have my lunch. I got a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Okay, I'm not spending one penny. And I think even though I wasn't making a lot of money at the time, I ended up paying off that $4,000 within maybe like 2 months. It was not a
Okay.
lot of time. And then I ended up buying a car all cash within it was right after my birthday. So it was less than 6 months. I had paid off that debt and bought a car
And bought a
because I was
car.
just so determined. And I was like, I hate this bus. And I hate waiting for it. I hate being on it. I want to get off. And so, it put me in a mindset where I just had a singular focus. And that focus was, all right, how do I get a promotion? How do I make more sales so I can have a bigger commission check? And I was just so laser focused. And so pretty quickly I got promotions. Once I had a car, I ended up moving to another store that was further away. Ended up working with who would eventually hire me at Verizon.
Okay.
And it was just one of those things where I think when you're just so determined to hit a goal, it just nothing stops you, especially when you're coming from that type of place. You're just
Yes.
hungry. And it
Yeah.
reminds me of like when you look at professional sports in America, it's always the kids who had nothing, right? Those are the
It's
top football players, basketball players, baseball players, coming from the Dominican Republic where they, didn't have shoes to play baseball and now they're in the
yes.
MLB because they just work so hard because
Yeah.
you want to get out of the place you're in so badly. And it's just like that. Nothing's going to stop you.
Mamba mentality, right?
Mamba,
Just
Mamba
Mamba
mentality,
mentality, right? It is just,
100%.
no one's gonna outwork me today.
Mm-mm.
No one's gonna bring it like I'm gonna bring it.
No, not at
It's a
all.
it's a
And it was
powerful
a
state of mind,
powerful mindset. It's so
right?
powerful. And it's like, when you think it would be later on that I would start to read and learn more about some of these
Mhm.
very ultra successful people and the mindset they have that led them to do
Yes.
what they needed to do. But once I did learn those stories, I was like, oh wow, that's what I've been doing. But now I know
Yes.
even more and I can do it to even higher level.
Any advice for someone that ends up listening to the podcast, that's in that spot, right? You know,
Hmm.
what's that thought that you can help somebody with? It's, in that's sitting on the bus right now going,
Hmm.
a little bit of woe is me, because there'll be some woe is me on there.
Oh yeah.
There's a bit of I'm gonna get I gotta, like you said, I gotta get out of here. But there's a
Yeah.
little bit of that woe is me. What would you have needed to hear?
I think the biggest thing is to dream big. Like if
Love
your
it.
only dream when you're on the bus going to work is to get a $2 raise, that's all you'll ever have. And to be honest,
Mm,
that just ain't worth it. That is not going
no.
to motivate you at all for $2. Like it's just not. And I think for me at the time, I wasn't interested in a raise. I was interested in making more than what my
More.
friends were going to be making.
You had a
Wherever they
great,
went
that's
to
right.
school,
Yeah.
that was my goal because I said, look, if I can't have the degree, if I'm making
Yeah.
more, then I'm good.
It,
I'll
it,
feel good
it
about
doesn't matter.
myself.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter anymore. And so, like, for me, that was always my goal. And I remember, like, I kept increasing it. So, like, what I would always do is one, I had an app on my phone that, like, I would track every dollar I spent and how much I saved. And I would set $10,000 goals. So my first goal was like get to $10,000, and then it was 20 and 30 and 40. And I just
Okay.
kept going up. But then the other thing was how much money I was making. And I remember working at a Sprint. I was probably maybe like a year or two in, and I got this offer to go work at a pretty shiesty company, to be honest. They were a used car warranty company,
Oh, goodness.
and they were like,
Oh,
yeah,
man.
you'll make fifty
You would,
thousand dollars a year. Like, and all I wanted at the time was to make 60 grand a year. If I was like, if I can make $60,000 a year, I'll be the happiest person alive. Like, nothing would be better. And I remember I was so ready to leave Sprint and go work for this shiesty company. And my boss would end up hiring me later at Verizon. He's like, dude, you cannot go work there. He's like, those people are scammers. They're scamming people out of their
yeah.
money for car warranties. He's
Yeah.
like,
Especially
you
used
cannot go
cars.
work there. And I wanted to so bad, but I listened to him. And it couldn't have been a year later that he left, started working at Verizon as a manager and then hired me on. In my first year at Verizon, I think I made like $75,000. And it was just one of those things where, I just kept dreaming big. When I was at Verizon, it wasn't enough just to be there. Like I was making more, even if I didn't sell a thing, I was going to make more money than I was making at Sprint. But I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be number one. And so I remember this contest comes around called Rockstar, Verizon Rockstar. And it's basically this pitch competition that they had created where you would pitch Verizon services and stuff like this, and you get on a stage, and then they would use your pitching to help coach and educate the other salespeople.
Okay. Oh,
And
great.
so, say it again.
Yeah. Great. That's great.
Yeah, so great program, and Verizon. Listen, if you wonder why your bill's so high, it's because Verizon does it big. They don't do it small. Okay.
I love it.
So we go. The finals was at the Fountain Blue Hotel in Miami, which if you've been there, the
Whoa.
nicest hotel on Miami
Whoa.
Beach. They rented the whole place out. They had Verizon Rockstar signage everywhere. So all the people in the hotel think there must be a concert happening at the hotel. And so they also had this great idea where all the employees who weren't competing, they had to get autographs for the employees who were competing. And so people are running up to me getting my autograph all day. And so everyone in the hotel thinks I'm some type of rock star. It was brilliant. And I eventually win this entire competition, right?
Whoa.
All these awards and accolades, a nice check. And man, when I tell you I was on stage, they had a private concert for us with One Republic, the rock group,
Whoa.
and I got to introduce them on stage. They gave me a signed guitar, and when I tell you, when I was on that stage, I felt like I was on top of the world. This is now maybe 5 years after I've left school or so,
Okay.
and I just felt on top of the world. Like I was like, I've made it. Like this is just incredible
Doesn't get
what's
better than
happening
this.
here.
Yeah.
It just doesn't get better. And I just thought back to like, man, a few years ago, I was really low and struggling. And now,
Yeah.
everyone at this Fortune 500 company knows who I am. I'm shaking hands with the CEO of the company. And it was just one of those things where if I had just been trying to get by, on that bus, just trying to survive, it never would have happened. I had to have big dreams. And once I had those dreams, then those weren't enough. I ended up leaving Verizon. Like I always just pushed the envelope further and further. And recently I was speaking to a group of high school students, and it was a snowy day. And I was telling the kids about how my first car was a little Mazda Miata. And if anyone who knows a Mazda
Oh,
Miata, that thing weighs like 4,000 pounds. You can almost pick it up with two hands. And I was telling them about how one time I ended up in a ditch on my way to work when it was snowing because I just refused to not go into work, even though I'm in this tiny little two-seater
yeah. That
sports car. And I was in a ditch, and I was like, man, guys, I remember being in a ditch trying to get to work on a day just like this. And I gave them this whole speech of all this stuff I've done in Shark Tank and getting into retail stores and all this great stuff. And at the end, I asked them all, I said, who here, you heard my story, who in here has big dreams? This is 2,000 high schoolers.
okay.
4 people can raise their hand, 4 students out of 2,000. And it
Wow.
broke me down because I remember being 19. And I'm just, man, if I didn't have big dreams, I would still be working at that same store. And we spent the next 20 minutes just talking to the kids about, okay, you guys have to have big dreams. If you don't have
Yeah.
big dreams, you can't go anywhere. You can't do anything. You got to believe in the impossible. And even if you don't make it all the way there, if you shoot for the stars, you'll land on the moon. But,
You might ricochet off. Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? It's like, but so many of them, even at that young age, had already believed this lie that, oh, I'll be happy to just get by. I'll
Yeah.
be happy to just be able to have my own apartment. And it's like, no, no, live your biggest dream
Mm.
and go do it.
As you were talking about the dream part, I love that because there's something that happens, and this is my experience, a lot of corporate planning, you know,
Mm,
working with individuals. I was in the life insurance industry, and a lot of that is individuals planning big stuff and
yep.
trying to dream big. And it's what separates people that become big and that don't, are the size of the aspiration.
Mm,
And it is interesting, Akeem, there's something that happens in the mind where if you set a limiting dream, right, even if it's a
mm,
decent sized dream, how you get there is very mechanical and very much matter changing matter. You're influencing, you're pushing up a hill when you set a dream that's reasonable, that's even a goal. When you set something so bananas, so crazy, you can't get there from here. You can't get there by matter
uh-uh.
changing matter. You can't get
Nope.
here by a plan. You have to completely break your thinking on how it's going to happen. And when you
100%.
when you can't get there from a normal process, it has to be something outside of of who you are, and you have to bring in other parts of your thinking and your imagination brings opportunities to you because you are setting
100%.
this in the universe, right? You're telling the universe, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm going. The universe is like, oh, okay, we got an order in.
Let's,
Akeem,
yeah, we
order up. Akeem's ordered
go
up a what is this? He's ordered up a 16 stack cheeseburger with, double
we
fries
got to
on,
figure something out.
squishies. They start, the universe goes to work, putting those opportunities in front. I
So
believe it
true.
goes to work, putting opportunities in front of you and things that you would never normally see.
It absolutely it does. And I remember when I finally left corporate America for good, my boss had given me a book called The Alchemist. And for those who
Oh
don't know, The
yeah.
Alchemist is just about that. And I didn't realize that. It took me a while to even read the book until it knocked me upside the head. I kept seeing it over and over again. And I just like, I got to read this book. And it talks about how the universe conspires to
Love
help
it.
you fulfill your
Conspires.
dream and to find your treasure. And it's so
Oh,
true because,
beautiful.
if what your goal is, you can reach by just waking up every day, working 10 hours a day and getting there.
Yes. Yeah.
It's hard. But if your goal is going to require a miracle, well, now you're not let me just work. You like, look, I got to look out for something impossible to happen
Yes.
because I don't know exactly how it's going to happen. I just know it's going to happen. And so for me, I end up having all of these types of impossible moments, right? When I
I love
changed
it.
my mindset. It took me a long time because as much as I was able to accomplish working in corporate, it was really just work. Like I didn't, it wasn't these impossible things happening. It was just me like, yeah, let's work, work, work.
Yes.
But I found myself completely drained. I was so drained and I was
Yeah.
no longer fulfilled by it because I had already done it. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, what more can I accomplish here other than working even harder? And so when I finally left to do my own thing, whether it was when I first started and I needed an influencer to promote my product Flipstick, and I didn't have the money to pay him, and I end up following, as the alchemist would put them, omens to get this family who had 2 million followers on YouTube and charged $75,000 a video to give me a video completely for free. Like, it was one of those things right out the gate on this journey that I was like, whoa, I never, no amount of work would have had this happen.
No.
Like, this was a miracle that happened. This was unbelievable that the universe brought these people together and gave me the intuition to send the email with the
Yeah.
subject line
Yeah.
and pay attention to know that all these things were start to connect, and then magically we meet in Huntsville, Alabama, at a Starbucks, and it turns out the father used to be a minister like my grandfather and left his
Oh.
job to start this influencer thing that his wife convinced their kids to do, and now they're multimillionaires, and they meet me at Easter time that my mom convinced me to go down to Huntsville, Alabama for Easter, and all of a sudden they're like, you know what? We're just going to do it for you for free. It was one of those things where it's like, man, you can't make this stuff up, and you can't force it to happen. It just happens, and you're
Yeah.
just along for the ride.
You are just along for the ride. Akeem, let's pull a card out of that. I mean, we could talk forever, but I'm still also wanting
Let's
to pull
get
the
a
card
card.
out because we got a good vibe going and we got a great conversation. Oh, well, this is kind of, I really do love the jar because there are times when, the alchemy is at work.
Ooh.
And I think we already covered this. Do you roll over the difficult parts in life or do they roll over you?
Oh man,
I think
it's funny.
we spent the last 30 minutes talking about that.
It's true, and for me, I'm hard headed. Okay, so the hard parts of life roll over me for like a couple weeks. I just sit there and I'm just, woe is me, and it's just rolling. And then eventually I'm like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of it rolling over me.
Stop.
I'm
Yeah.
rolling over it, and
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't know if that's the right approach, but for me it works because sometimes I'm just like, look, sometimes you got to be sad. You got to be like, man, this
Yeah.
sucks, because sometimes you're angry. You just let those emotions out. But I never let that hold me forever because letting it fester too long is it's a disease. So
Yes.
I like to let myself feel sorry for myself for a couple minutes, and then I'm like, okay, that's enough. Let's get to work, and it's time for us to roll over these parts. And I'll give you an example. You mentioned Shark Tank,
Yeah.
and I had originally applied to Shark Tank because I didn't know how to get my website functioning well and selling well, and I had
so
sold.
so just apply to the hardest thing on the planet because
Just
I
yeah.
can't do a website, but I can do this.
The website was maybe selling like 1 unit a week. I said, Shark Tank will be easier. And I go to Las Vegas, apply to be on the show. 40,000 people apply every year. It gets down past, get to the final 1,000, the final 250. And they're like, look, Akeem, you made it super far in the process. We're down to 250 people. We need to get it down to 120 to bring out to LA to film. We're going to call you either way. You're very, very close. I said, fantastic. And then I get a phone call and they tell me I'm not going to be on Shark Tank. And I had put all of my eggs in
Oh,
one basket. I
oh,
remember the square on the sidewalk that I was on when I got the
when you
phone
got the
call.
call.
I was so disheartened because I just knew, I'm Red the Alchemist. It's like the universe will conspire to help you achieve your dreams. And all of a sudden it's been taken away from me. And I spent the next week or so just frozen,
Oh man.
stagnant. I was totally numb because I felt like, how could the universe let me down like this? How could it
Yeah,
not
yeah.
allow me to have this? This was meant for me. What I didn't know was that it would send me on a journey that would pale in comparison to just getting on the Shark Tank the first time around. Because what would end up happening is after I felt sorry for myself, I said, okay,
Yep.
I couldn't get on Shark Tank, but I have to get another celebrity to invest in my business. So in Vegas, we were at the CES Consumer Electronics Show. I met a guy. He ends up inviting us to the Super Bowl to give away flip sticks at the celebrity football game. So I go
What?
down to Atlanta to the celebrity
What?
football game, okay, at the Super Bowl. We go there. We meet this kid, Salento. He's a rapper. If you remember the song, Watch Me Whip, Watch Me Nay Nay, it's the kid that wrote that song. So we meet him at the celebrity football game. He invites us to LA to the BET Awards. He's like, oh, my uncle's having an event. So then we go to LA to the BET Awards. When we're in LA at the BET Awards, I took my mom out because it was her birthday. I said, hey, come with us. You know, we're going to be doing these events, blah, blah. And on her way back, this just shows you how crazy stuff is. On her way back home, she left a little bit before me. She was on the plane with this guy who claims to know Sean Diddy Combs, and that he knows Sean Diddy Combs' best friend, and that he could help me in my business. So I was like, just call this guy. I met him on the plane. He sat next to me.
Sure,
Call
Mom.
this guy up.
Yeah, sure, Mom.
He
Thanks.
connects me to one guy, to his cousins, uncles, aunties. I'm way down the rabbit hole here. End up talking to these guys. One guy claims is an ex-felon who had moved $250 million worth of drugs through private jets and went to prison for it. The other guy also went to prison. He claims to be Diddy's best friend. I don't know how he ended up in prison, but I'm pretty sure he took a rap for him. Somehow, both of these guys get presidential pardons. And now I'm on the phone with these guys. And they're like, yeah, if you just give us 50% of your business, you know, we'll get you in. You know, we'll get you all in Hollywood. You'll da-da-da-da. And I remember telling my mom, I was like, Mom, you're the one who set this thing in motion. I was like, what do you think? And she's like, well, son, you know, I can't tell you what to do, but if you go in business with convicted felons, your company will always be a company owned by convicted felons.
Convicted felons, yeah.
And I'm like, you know, you're right. So I call these guys back up. I'm like, yeah, it's a no for me, dog. They did not take that too kindly. They were very upset about it. And they're like, bro, F you can't do shit. You're never going to make it. You're a piece of, why'd you waste our time? And, you know,
goodness.
To be honest,
And now it's going sideways.
It pissed me off. It made me very upset. I had a chip on my shoulder. And I said, you know what? I heard about the event that you're talking about, the Revolt Summit, and I'm going to go there anyway without you, and I'm going to get Sean Diddy Combs to invest in my business just to spite you. So that was the plan. So I find out there's a pitch competition. There's a pitch competition going on at this event. It's a music and comedy summit. So I had no business being there, okay? I'm trying to pitch this idea for a phone accessory. And I go get my ticket. I probably invested about $1,000 between the cost of the ticket, the plane ticket, the rental car. And as a few days after I book everything, I find out the pitch competition for businesses is closed. I'm not going to be able to pitch. But at this time of my life, my mindset was so determined. I'm like, how in the world did I go from the Super Bowl to the BET Awards, to my mom here meeting these random guys, to these guys trying to scam me out of my business, for me to hear about this event and then me see an ad for the event on my Instagram page, and I'd never heard of this event in my life. I just knew I'm supposed to be at this event, and I'm supposed to make it happen.
Yeah.
So I find out there's a music competition, and they're giving away a record deal. So I say, look, I was in Mr. Karpowitz's jazz lab band. I'll just write a rap, and I will rap the pitch for Flipstick, and I'll get a record deal, sell my business. It'll all work out. We'll figure it out as we go.
Sure it will.
Yeah, that was the plan. I would not recommend for those in college to put that on your dissertation. You will get an F.
Yeah.
But that was my plan. And so I go. I do my rap. They put me in the top 5. Okay. I'm going to be able to get on stage. DJ Khaled is there. Puffy's there. Timbaland. All of these like top rap artists in the game are all there judging this competition. And then I find out that I've been disqualified because I wasn't a real rapper. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was just trying to pitch my
yeah,
business.
yeah.
And I'm like, look, if the judges loved it, what difference does it make? Well, they felt differently. They said, nope, you're disqualified. But once again, my mindset was like, no, I've followed the omens. I'm meant to be here. I'm going to make this work no matter what. And so right before the music competition finale, there was a comedy show. And in the comedy show, something inside of me just said, stand up. I stood up. I held my product in the air. The comedian looks at me and he's like, I don't know if I can curse on the show, but he's like, bro, what the fuck are you trying to sell me? And I'm like, let me tell you, it's called a flip stick, and you can stick it to a wall. It's a kickstand for your phone. You can make TikTok videos, and it's based off NASA technology. I go this whole pitch. And he said, I got one question for you. He's like, will that flip stick stick to my girl's ass? Because if it will, I'll take 20 of them right now. And the whole crowd just starts laughing, and they start running up to the stage and telling the comedian about all the products that they have and the services and their businesses. And eventually he lets a kid on the stage to freestyle. I'm like, wait a minute, I also have a rap. And he ultimately lets me on the stage. I perform my rap during his comedy set. And the same woman who was running this competition, who disqualified me, runs up to the stage and is like, that was incredible. Come with me. I go backstage. I get to meet DJ Khaled, and Diddy's there. I meet the CEO of all the companies that Diddy owns. The sponsors were AT&T, so I meet the AT&T executives. And I'm sitting back here, right, in the back lot. It's all you can eat, all you can drink, VIP. And I'm just like, how in the world did I just get here? This worked. And as I was standing there, I remember I was drinking, because the drinks were free, and the drinks were very high for general admission. The drinks back here were free. I'm drinking, it has so much adrenaline pumping through my body that I couldn't even feel it. And as I'm sitting there just kind of basking in the moment, I see 2 6-foot, 250-pound, huge dudes walking straight toward me. And I'm like, oh my God. That's them. That's the 2 guys who tried to swindle me out of my business. Turns out they do know Diddy. And they walk up to me.
Oh,
and I'm not
goodness.
gonna lie, I was a little scared kid. I was
Yo,
like,
well,
oh God, I'm about to get pounded.
Akeem, you're going down.
I'm going down. They walk up to me, and one of them, his name was DP. And DP looks at me up and down, and he's like, you know what? You did your thing up there, man. He's like, but you wouldn't have had to do all that if you had just went into business with us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And they walk off. And I was like, whew. But it was one of those things where I was like, wow, how did that work? And what would end up happening is I would call everyone whose phone number I got at that event over and over. And eventually they would buy a ton of flip sticks. And they invited me out to Los Angeles to their next event. And at their next event, I met Snoop Dogg. And Snoop Dogg ended up loving the flip stick. And he went crazy for it. And they went, between him and the Revolt organization, they called up a casting director at Shark Tank who they knew. And a few months later, got me on the show. And it was one of those things where it was like, wow. How did my failure of not making it on the Shark Tank led me on this crazy journey that ultimately allowed me to walk right through the door and get onto the show?
Came through the back door. Yeah.
The back door. It was unbelievable. And so those are one of those things where it's like, man, I could have so easily rolled over,
yeah.
You know, and just accepted the rejection and failure and call it a day. I mean, there's so many times I could have done that. But I just refused to. I just kept going.
And just pushing open doors that were a little bit closed. No, it doesn't sound like any of those doors were hard closed, right? Every one of them might have been closed in your face, but when you turn the handle, it wasn't locked.
It wasn't locked. Closed doors aren't locked doors.
Yeah. You were there, the closing doors, and you're like, close a window, and you're like, oh, let me just shimmy this. Oh, it's still open.
There's a great book. That's so true. There's a great book called The Third Door. And it's like some people can come through the front. Some people can come through the back. some people have to climb through the window, go through the kitchen, sneak past 3 guards to get into
Yes.
the building. And
Into
it's
the
like,
third door.
look, I'm a third door type of guy.
Yes.
And I think that if you aren't born in a position where you know people, your parents know people, someone can just make a phone call and get you places, you got to take the third door until you know some people that can make those phone calls for you. And, I just kept taking that third door. And eventually I found myself starting to know some people that can make phone calls to get me in the front door. But it really took going through that third door quite a few times before that happened.
Yeah. It's a lot of third doors in life to get to success, I think.
Absolutely.
This kind of reminds me of I follow one of these Indian gurus. He's a famous guy on TikTok. You probably watched him. I can't remember
Uh-huh.
Jadru or I cannot remember his name.
Okay.
I got to remember the pronunciation. But he's talking about this manifestation, kind of this idea stuff. And if you're a really really smart person, you're too critical thinking sometimes to believe things can
Mm,
happen. And one of the stories he talks about is this very simple man goes to the temple and just prays to Shiva and just says, Shiva, I need a house. And he says, the beautiful part is that man, he doesn't think about all the reasons why it can't happen. He just puts
mm-mm,
his trust in the God, and it's up to the God
mm-hmm,
how to make it happen. He's
mm.
not thinking about the how and all the reasons why it wouldn't happen. He just, Shiva, I need a house.
And it's
And
so important, right? Because you don't know. It's not going to happen the way you think it's going to
a-
happen. It never
and I think,
does.
yeah, and that's the point of it. It's
But
not,
but when you have that mindset of like, I don't need to know how, I don't need to know why, I just believe it's going to happen. In
yes,
my experience, what happens is when that feeling comes inside of you that says, take a left, even though left is off the beaten path, it's into the grass, it's through the field, and
yes,
it looks like you should just go straight. You just say, oh, well, God told me to take a left, so here we go. And next thing you know, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And I think that, for
that's so
me,
true.
that's very difficult because, I have ADHD. I'm always thinking, 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 and I can think myself right out of an opportunity
Yeah.
and not take a chance because it doesn't sound logical. It doesn't make sense. And so I think it's so powerful sometimes to just believe in the impossible. Because when you
Mm,
believe in the impossible, man, it's the only way you can only have impossible things happen to you if you believe in them. And I remember as a young, and this is something I've always had, I don't know why, but even as a young kid, like when there would be contests or raffles, I'd always just assume I was gonna win. And be like, yeah, I'll probably win if I do
yeah.
this. And I remember as a kid, I wanted I wanted so bad to go to Six Flags. My parents hardly ever took me to Six Flags. And I was just like, man, I want a season pass for Six Flags. And so I enter this contest. It was a raffle for a season pass to Six Flags, right? And I win. I win the season pass to Six Flags. My mom's like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's free, and we just have to drive out there. We can go." So this whole year, right, I go to Six Flags for free. And my mom's like, you're not getting a season pass next year, so make sure you get all your stuff in now. And I was like, I really want to go back to Six Flags next year. And so I remember it was like one of the last days Six Flags was open. It was Fright Fest, which is like October,
Oh yeah,
November.
the actor, yeah.
And we go to Six Flags, and off to the right, as you walking in, there was a raffle for a free season pass. Now I've already won a season. Like this current season pass, I won in a raffle. There's no
Nope,
way I'm going to win a second year of free season pass in a raffle.
doesn't
And I
happen.
walk over and I sign my name up and I fold it up and I put it in the envelope. And when I tell you a month later, kid, we got a letter in the mail saying you won a free season. My mom couldn't believe it. She's like, "What is going on?"
Oh, I'd bring you straight to the church for an exorcism if that was the
Oh,
case.
and it was just one of those things where I just always assumed, like, oh, I'm going to win. And when I won so many things like that, because I've just been a person where I'm like, yeah, I think this is meant for me to
Let's
have it.
gonna let's try another question. we're getting close. We're getting close to the end, and I'm sure this one will take us. This will take us home. Oh, this is a good one for you. It's good. And these are I want to remind you, they're prompts. So you take it any way you want.
Okay.
In your opinion, which is more powerful? A hopeful mind or a hopeful heart?
Ooh,
So in your opinion, what's more powerful? Hopeful mind or a hopeful heart?
wow, that's a tough one. I think I would have to say a hopeful heart. And I'll tell you why.
Hmm.
In my experience, my mind plays a lot of tricks on me, and it's very fickle. It can be hopeful one second, and the next second, it can be
Hmm.
totally fearful.
So true.
And I often l- I have this thing where I'm like, I need to protect my mind. So I have to feed my mind with positive videos and books and things
Yes.
that remind it, like, no, impossible things can happen. They're just as likely as the horrible outcome happening. They're both equal. But my mind refuses to believe that because it's like, I'm trying to keep us alive. Okay. And
Yes.
I,
Yeah.
I got to prepare for the worst. But your
So true.
heart, I think for me, is so much easier for it to have a hopeful heart and to just
Hmm.
to be able to feel that positive energy inside of you, even when your mind tells you no, 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 no. And I think a lot of times for me, my heart has to convince my mind that it's wrong. And I'll go
Hmm.
back to the alchemist again. And in the alchemist, it talks about how your heart is connected to the soul of the universe, and they
Oh, love
speak
it.
to each other. And so, what your heart believes for itself is what the universe believes for it. And if in your heart you can first accept, like, man, I'm supposed to be, and this is for me personally, I'm
Yes.
supposed to be one of the greatest motivational speakers on the planet. Well, my mind may not believe that yet. It's like, well, you're not making that much money doing
There's
this.
no
You don't
evidence. Yeah.
meet people.
There's
There's
no
no
evidence to
evidence for
prove it.
this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in my heart, I can still feel that. And when my heart feels that way, it sends those vibrations out to the universe and says, hey, this is where I'm at. I need you to catch up with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as my
Exactly.
brain starts seeing the evidence of it, and as I start convinced, as my heart convinces my
Oh, yeah.
mind, like, hey, this can be it. And then the universe starts dropping in things. It's like, oh, wow, stuff's shifting, stuff is happening here. All of a sudden, my brain gets on board. And so I think that for a lot of people, the mind is so hard to control. I remember this old woman who I had met at a church. She was a very like mystic type of woman, very free spirited. And I remember telling her I went to go get a diagnosis to tell me that I had ADHD. And I got the diagnosis, and they're like, yes, in fact, you do have ADHD.
Yeah.
And I remember I was telling her, and I was kind of worried about it because I'm like, oh man, this is what's caused all my problems my whole life is I have ADHD. And all she said to me, she's like, why are you worried? Why are you upset about having ADHD? And I was like, well, that means I can't concentrate. And that's why I've always had problems with school and where I don't always want to work. She's like, you're wrong. And she said, imagine a mind so powerful that it can think of the next thing before you're done thinking of the current thing. She's like, you're only afraid because you can't control your mind. And she's like, but a mind
Oh,
that powerful under your control can do unlimited things.
whoa.
And when she said that to
Whoa.
me, and this is just like an old woman, and somewhere I have a little, when she said this to me, she gives me a little piece of wood that she's ruffling around her house, and she's like, I want to give you something to remind you of this. She gave me this little piece of wood. I have it around here somewhere.
Yeah.
And she's like, whenever you don't believe what I just told you, I want you to take this wood and I want you to feel the bristles of the wood on your skin to remind you of what I've told you. And it's one of those things where, I think for a lot of us, we have very powerful minds. and we get convinced by society that we should sedate our mind and we need
Yes.
different medicines to control it. Our chemistry is out of balance. And I'm a firm believer that our bodies are incredibly intelligent and our minds are incredibly intelligent. And all of those signals that it sends, that's all they are, signals. When we feel depression and we feel anxiety, the anxiety is not the problem. The anxiety is a warning to say, hey, something's
Mm.
off, and I need for you to know this is the only way I have of communicating with you is by having you feel this feeling. And we
Yes.
run away from those feelings, not even accepting like, oh wow, no, this is not the problem. This is communication. And I just believe that, man, it's so much easier for me to have hope in my heart. And then that hope in my heart can go and help my body and my mind and every other part of my body is so much easier. And so that's why for me, I was saying, man, having a hopeful heart is the first place to start. But when you have a hopeful mind, oh man, once your mind gets hopeful, it's over. Like you have
It's
superpowers.
hopeless for the it's hopeless for the other side.
It's hopeless for the other side.
Dragging you down. I love what you said earlier about dreaming. If you can't believe or dream in the impossible will never happen. Or I think you said
Never.
miracles, or you said impossible. I can't
Yeah.
remember which one it was, right? But if
Both
you don't believe in a miracle, how is it going to happen?
can never happen. And
So
here's the interesting thing.
so powerful.
You'll walk right past the miracles. That's the thing. Is they're already there waiting for you. You
I
just don't see them. You just don't see
I
them. And I remember when, we had been on Shark Tank, and on the day our Shark Tank episode airs, right? I do all this stuff. I finally make it on the show. It's getting ready to air. I have a watch party. It's during the pandemic. I'm like, I've finally made it. It gets pushed back by 2 hours because it was the week of the election and no one knew who the president was going to be. So I'm a little nervous. I'm like, okay, it's 2 hours late, but it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be all right. And right before it comes on, the newscaster is like, hey, if we have information, if we find out who the president is, we may interrupt Shark Tank to let you know. And Ken, in that moment, I said, I don't care who the president of the United States
yeah,
is.
exactly.
I just need, I just need my Shark Tank to air. And the whole episode goes, and there's no interruptions. I was the last person in the episode. It comes on just like I did the rap at the Revolt Summit. They wanted me to do the rap on Shark Tank. So I come
Yeah,
out,
for
I'm doing
sure.
my rap. My whole family's going crazy, all my friends. And about 30 seconds into my actual pitch, we're interrupting this regularly scheduled programming to bring you a message from candidate Joe Biden. And my heart sunk into the ground. When I tell you, you talk about getting rolled over, I felt like a train had hit me. I was like, how in the world do I get to the
Of- of-
Super Bowl of business and it gets snatched away from me? And not only was
by
it
some silly
snatched,
announcement.
and then Joe Biden got on screen and said, I don't have any news to report. I said, oh, are you kidding me? You got nothing to say? You interrupted me to tell me that you got nothing to
Nothing. This.
say? And when you go on Shark Tank, they make you sign a lot of documents. But one of the documents you have to sign is saying, hey, even if you're scheduled to air, it may not air. And there's
Yes.
nothing we can do about it. We're not going to re-air it. It is what it is. Because one time, the Boston bombing happened during a Shark Tank episode. And that person and those people never went on air. They never ended up having their shot.
Never got
And so they
rescheduled. Yeah.
sued. And so now you have to sign a document that says, hey,
Okay.
acts of God we can't control. Okay.
Yeah.
It may happen. And so I'm sitting there that night just depressed because I know I've signed this document. And I know that they're not going to re-air it. And some of the other people in the same episode as me found my information, reached out to me, and were like, look, we all got screwed because we were all late. DVRs didn't record. A lot of people missed it, but you got it worst of
Oh,
all.
that's right.
You should reach out. And I'm like, but guys, they've already said it's too
Yeah,
bad.
not
So
happening.
sad. And they said, no, you should do it. And in that moment, it was so hard because I really did not want to do it. I was just so sad
Third try,
that,
right?
man, the third. So I reach out to the the showrunner, the executive producer of Shark Tank. I make a video, and I make a video, a real sad video where I'm just like, man, it's just not fair. And I send him this video, and he responds back, and he's like, hey, Keem, I feel really bad about what happened. He's like, but as we make no promises. It's in the documents, blah, blah, blah. You signed, da, da, da. And at the end of his email, he said, even still, we've been thinking about it. And tentatively, we're going to re-air your episode on January 1st, on New Year's Day, in its normal time slot. I
What?
looked at the email and said, what? And for the first time in the history of Shark Tank, they re-aired an episode in prime time. And the only reason they were able to do it, Ken, is because that airtime was a holiday, and it wasn't supposed to be like they had the time slot, the prime time
Yeah.
slot for it, but they weren't planning on running a new episode that day. And because all this stuff happened at the right place, right time, and then I emailed, he said, you know what? We're just gonna go ahead and air this episode. And it was only, this was like a month after we were supposed to be on. So it was just unbelievable that this had happened. And so imagine I hadn't reached out, because I signed a document saying it's impossible.
Yeah. Don't
It's
bother.
impossible for us to do it. But I wouldn't accept. I wouldn't accept it. I said, well, look, the impossible will have to be possible for me. And it was.
The impossible. Actually, you believed in the impossible. Akeem, it's been a great, amazing conversation. What a fabulous human you
Fantastic.
are. And you are really, I think you're flourishing. Feels like
I feel very fortunate, Ken. I've gotten to live an incredible life these past few years, and they've come with lots of ups and downs. Okay,
I'm sure.
it's not all roses. However, man, what a wonderful life. It's been so exciting. I've had so much fun. I've got to do things that I never thought I'd be able to do. And now, on this new journey in life for me, I get to tell people. I realized so many people kind of saw our story with just the glossy
Yes.
cover, right?
Yes.
And they're like, oh, yeah, it went on Shark Tank, it blew up overnight, done deal, boom, boom, boom. And I was like, that's not the story. And it's
That's
dangerous for you to even believe it's a story, because then when it's you, you'll think, oh, it's not working out for me. Was it meant for me? And I'm like, no, it is meant for you. It just doesn't look the way you thought it was going to look. And I'm grateful for all of the setbacks I've had now, because now I get to go into rooms and tell people about this journey and this story. And it's exciting. No one wants to hear it just all worked out. No, they want to hear the ups and the downs and the curves and the villains and the heroes. And, man, it's just been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun.
I love it, Akeem. I really appreciate the story, and man, it is the best part of the story for me. Almost as just me visualizing you sitting on the bus alone in a janky old, St. Louis bus, like you said, with
Janky.
with just a rough, the people on there are having a hard time, right? Everybody on the bus is grinding. And, the fact that you're able to pull yourself out, man, here's to all the grinders in the world. Akeem, thanks so much. Thanks, everybody, for listening to The Human. If you made it this far on the audio version, drop down, give us a little rating. And if you've got any comments on how to make the show better, different, what you like, what you don't like, throw those in there as well. Akeem, hang around for 20 seconds. I'll see you on the other side. Welcome to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Join us on a journey where we unravel the intricacies of work